all for your time and thank you for your patience. I know it's always a sacrifice to get up on a Saturday morning, whether you're working from home or for some of us, especially the front line, the essential workforce people who have to actually physically be there in place in order to make sure that things happen and to make sure that all of us continue to be able to enjoy life, not to the fullest extent, but to the limited extent based on the circumstances that we find ourselves in today with COVID-19, as well as a host of other things. Um, what I'd also like to put up on the share screen at some point and perhaps post it in the general chat are some of the questions that we want to pose this afternoon as we proceed. So what I'd like to do now is just take a brief moment to introduce our guests, and it may not be the fullest introduction that you all deserve based on your histories and based on your work that you currently do. Uh, Maurice Warford, who is a member of our union, is also a professional carpenter, and he is a former union member of another union, and I'd like for him to talk about his experiences as far as that goes. Very intelligent, very socially conscious and aware brother. And we definitely welcome him to this particular discussion about who represents Black workers. I'll move on next to Sister Karima Howard. And if she could just bear with me for a moment. Sister Karima Howard is the recording secretary for the ATU, that's Amalgamated Transport Union, or Transit Union, Local 85. And she's also the vice president for the ATU's Black Caucus. So we're very honored with her presence. And again, uh, we've known Sister Karima for quite some time, and she's always been a hard worker and a strong advocate, not just for the people within her caucus or the people within her union, but the community itself. And last but certainly not least, we welcome uh, Brother Jeffrey Richardson. And Brother Jeff, we could do a program just about Brother Jeff in terms of the things that he's been able to do in his travels as a union leader and organizer. I'll just say that Brother Jeffrey Richardson is the president at ATU Local 1342, and he's also is a delegate for the ATU International Black Caucus. So we like to welcome all three of our panelists. My name is Khalid Rahim. I'll be facilitating this afternoon's discussion. And we definitely welcome comments and insights from the viewing and the listening audience as well. Again, this is an event that's being put forward and that has been organized by the New African Workers Union. We're independent Black union. We're not affiliated with any of the major unions. We thought it was very important to pull together our own thing, again, to deal with that issue and deal with the question, the theme of this afternoon's discussion: who represents Black workers? Our experiences and our observations have led us to believe that one of the things that we must do as members of the Black working class is to organize amongst ourselves, whether we organize the caucuses within the established labor unions or we organize independent unions so we can advance our own interests. So with that being said, I'd like to welcome everyone. And if we could start and you could just maybe tell us a little bit more about yourself. Let's start with Brother Maurice. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you for having me on. Um, to be quite honest with you, I think we're represented better by our ancestors than anyone I can think of today. And I'd be thinking of Nate Smith when it comes to labor.
Mm,
Although I understand that we're dealing with the now 2021 edition of the same Devil's Playbook, from my experiences in the union, and I got to be honest, my better experiences independently thereafter. It's almost like be as back in the day when you talk about Jim Crow, you look at the behavior, how it is now, and how it really ain't that much different. Experienced a lot of racism, a lot of violent in the past, and still today. In your face, and you can't get the job. But today, it's just more like you can get into the unions, but we're just going to dish out our racism within that body itself. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
And but the positives of it, a lot of education. And I'm a advocate of learning the trade. The unions did, it did teach a lot of great theory, and I can take somebody's house apart and put it back together again. But I just reached a point where I don't want to do that for any corporations or uh, the other side. I don't know how else to put it. And I put that energy just into our people as best I can, because there's a lot that we can do for ourselves, and that's where I stand on that. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate everybody else that for attending and listening as well.
So thank you, Brother Reese, as we call you. Sister Karima, if you could chime in and give us a little bit more detail and background as far as who you are and the work that you do.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the invite, first of all. Thank you for your interest in representing Black workers in their union. I just wanted to make an acknowledgement and a correction, Brother Khalid. So I am the vice president for the Pittsburgh chapter Black Caucus. Mr. Jeff Richardson, who is over me, he is actually the vice president for the International Black Caucus.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, like I
So
said, we
he
could have
is
been
my
here all day.
mentor. Yeah.
Yeah, we could have been here all day talking about Brother
Yeah,
Jeff.
Jeff is the big guy when it comes to the Black Caucus.
Okay, okay.
So I am the vice president under President Doug Connor Sr. for the Pittsburgh chapter. So I thank you guys once again for the invite.
Well, thank you,
Um,
Sister Karima.
my outlook on um, labor unions, period. It's different for me. It's been more of a strength for me. So I am an advocate of unions. If you have a union in your job, I know like with the post office, it's optional to join the union. Now I know for me, as an African American woman, as a Black woman, what we've struggled with as in equality. One of the pluses to belonging to a union is when that contract is signed, there is no color. That becomes the blessing in being with a union. When my Caucasian counterparts get $32 an hour, I get $32 an hour. When they are covered fully, medical benefits, the same goes for me. So that breaks the line of what we used to deal with. That's how the Black Caucus even originated. When the original, and I guess Jeff can give you more of the history. I forgot his name, which is so sad. I should not. When he started in transportation, they didn't want him to join the union. So he said, I'll join my own. And here it is now in 2021. And what you're advocating for, if we could get our Black workers to understand their value.
I don't know whether this is my end or yours, but it froze a little bit. It appears to be something with the transmission that's going on here. Yeah, I think Sister Karima, you may need to re-engage again. I think we lost your connection. So you may want to re-engage and repeat the last part of your statements and your comments. Okay. All right. So what I'd like to do at this point, for those of us, because I think Sister Karima, I think we lost her connection. So what I'd like to do is hear from uh, from Jeffrey Richardson.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, sir. I can hear you. So if you could just give us a little bit more about your background, and then perhaps if we can pick back up with Karima a little later, she can finish her statements and comments as well. Yes,
All
sir.
right. First of all, I want to say thank you, sir, for the invite. I had so much going on today, but I wanted to make sure that I spent a little time um, on this panel. I think it was something that was needed a long time ago. First of all, as you know, my name is Jeffrey Richardson. I'm the president business agent and a chair pension chairman here at Local 1342 in Buffalo, New York. I'm also the vice president for the Black Caucus in the United States and Canada. Um, Titles actually doesn't mean anything to me. I think as we spoke the other day, we're here to serve, not to be served. Those are just titles that give you a platform to be able to speak in different places to help educate our young Black men and women as well as our older Black um, men and women. Um, and not only educating them, but you're also being educated yourself. I was a person who I've been on this job going on my 34th year. I'm here at this job right now. And I was a person who always was a go-getter. I didn't believe in just sitting back and saying what I can't do. And I believe that came from my parents. Always was a person who believed as an African American young man that I can do it. And I'm the only one that held every position in our local except for one. I started off as a steward, the board member, the recording secretary, vice president, president, and I wouldn't take no for an answer. The first Black or African American um, president that we ever had. And I believe that, you know what, we can be all that we can be, but I believe when I do things, I read, and I say this on my podcast all the time, I comprehend, which gives me knowledge. But even more than knowledge, when you walk into any room as an African American and as a man, that gives you power. So, you know, we always say, you know what, we need that knowledge. That knowledge is very important, but that knowledge also gives you power. And that when you walk into any meeting or any convention or any podcast like we're having now, that knowledge gives you power where you go in there and you can sit down and look at that other man or that other race or that other woman, whoever it might be, and you can look at them face to face and you can tell them, you know what, we're on this same level playing field. There's no big eyes and there's no little U's. So that's where I'm at. That's where I'm gonna continue to be at. And I believe in serving. And that's what I'm here today to do. To follow your lead, whatever you need me to help do is to serve. That's where I'm at, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that, Brother Jeff. One of the things we'd like to do now, again, we seem to have lost Karima. We lost her connection.
I'll text her. Let me see.
Okay, and so maybe we can get her to reconnect. But what I'd also like to do now is to post some of the questions that we planned on answering this afternoon. If you could just give me just a moment here. as far as the talking points. And so these are the actual talking points for the panelists. And we want to encourage the people who are viewing and listening in to think about these talking points as well, and to give some input. You know, we would like to hear from you through the chat on Facebook. If you have some ways to communicate, that'd be greatly appreciated as well. So as we try to reconnect with Karima Howard, I'd just like to read over the general question and then the 6 talking points that we want to explore for this afternoon. The general question is, in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, massive job loss, evictions, and police brutality, who represents Black workers in their communities? I guess we could also add, in the midst of an attempted or possible attempt at a coup d'etat, again, who represents the interests of the Black community, who represents the interests of Black workers? I'm sure that many of us are fully aware of what went down just a few days ago, as far as the supporters of Donald Trump, the supporters of President Trump, storming Congress and basically attempting to take over the congressional halls and pushing back against the results of the election from this past November, still demanding that Donald Trump have a second term in the White House, regardless of what the polls say and regardless of what the voters may have said. We're not here this afternoon to dispute whether that group is correct or incorrect. But again, it's just another situation that the national Black community finds itself in, whereas our votes and our political capital was without a doubt the decisive factor in Joe Biden's election to the White House. And what does that say about our economic development and our social development and our political development, but also what type of pushback could we expect in light of the attempted coup d'etat, what I define as an attempted coup d'etat, and what does that portend for the collective Black community in terms of jobs, in terms of organizing, and in terms of our general well-being. So again, in the midst of that, as well as COVID-19, massive job loss, evictions, as well as police brutality, who represents Black workers and their communities? Our talking points are: 1, before the pandemic, what were some of the issues and challenges faced by Black workers in your industry and occupation? 2, what are some of the unique challenges and experiences you and other workers are dealing with due to COVID-19? 3, have you noticed or experienced changes within your neighborhood and community? And 4, has there been any organized response from your union or labor leaders regarding COVID-19, its economic impact, as well as worker safety? 5, also, what about the issue of police misconduct, the shootings and killings of Black people by the police, and the lack of accountability? And 6, what types of policies or programs would you recommend? What would you recommend that labor leaders and unions do in support of advancing change and justice for Black workers in the Black community? So these are the areas that we would like to explore this afternoon. These are the things that we would like to discuss this afternoon. And again, we welcome the response of the panelists, and we also welcome the response and the input of our listening and viewing audience as well. So let's jump into it. The talking points. Before the pandemic, what were some of the issues and challenges faced? Who wants to go first?
So when you're talking about in the midst of, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Okay, the COVID-19 pandemic. and we're talking about massive job loss, eviction, and police brutality. So, if I can speak on here in Buffalo, um, and we're talking about first the unions, I think it all depends on two leadership comes into play, whether you're on top of it or not. Here, so I only can speak for Buffalo right now. I haven't had massive job loss. I haven't had any layoffs. I'm gonna start there at all during the COVID. What I was
Okay.
able to do is, I believe, even when it first started, I made sure we were on top of with PPEs, personal protection equipment, where even if the company didn't do it, even if the company didn't do it, I went out and purchased 12,000 sets of gloves for our members, our essential workers that's on the front line. I couldn't wait and depend on what the company did. So even with we had three departments that were going to have layoffs. I was able to convince them to move these people into other departments, and actually got one department paid $2 and something more an hour than their
Okay.
regular rate. So as far as layoffs here, I didn't have that. But when I listened at other places, a lot of my answers is going to come back. A lot of people up top don't look like us, and I think that's where a lot of the problems come in. Is they don't look like us. As I sit on the board, even with the AFL-CIO, it's only two of us that look like us. Um, and I don't think they're as concerned about what's going on. When you talk about this police brutality, and if you look at what happened in Washington, imagine if that was us going up them stairs, just even walking up them stairs. When they had the Black Lives Matters movement and just standing there peacefully, those stairs were full of police ahead of time, all around that area. So who's speaking up for us? We need more people like yourselves and Karima and Brother Maurice Wolford, who's willing to stand up and talk about these issues and not hide behind. A lot of people say things, but they don't want to be in the forefront and say it. Um, it's the Black workers, the African American workers in our communities. We have to stand up. We have to say something. We have to be out front, and we have to try to make change. If we just sit back, change is never going to happen. We can always talk the good game, but we have to put forth the effort. And I think that we as leaders have to step up, and we have to train. I'm gonna say this, then I'm gonna be done because I got another meeting, so I'm gonna be going fast. We have to train um, our young people. You know what? We have to take them by the hand, spend some time with them to let them know what the union is about, how they can be more effective in our community, and that it's okay to speak up on certain issues. It's okay to tell the adults what's going on. It's okay to tell them what they see. So that's where my mindset is right now, sir.
Brother, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a whole bunch of sense. And it's interesting that for the work that you do in your particular industry, you guys didn't experience any massive job loss, um, which is a good thing. But I know in certain other types of industries, especially those industries where you have a lot of women who do the work, right? They had some serious issues in terms of losing their jobs, right? Clerical workers, service employees in stores, restaurants, things of that nature. The work wasn't there because of COVID-19, because everything was being shut down, everything was being contained and constrained.
Mm.
Uh, and so people were just laid off. And some of those jobs are never to return. There are many folks who work in the service and retail business who have seen their jobs just evaporate because the businesses that they worked for no longer exist. And the small businesses, for example, Those stores have closed down. Those restaurants have closed down, even with the limited support that they have received from the federal government and in some instances from their local governments as well.
Mhm.
Karima, did you want to chime in? I'm sorry we missed you before. There was a disconnection.
Yeah, I totally apologize. We're in our car on our way to memorial service, so I apologize. I lost you when we were getting in the car. One of our coworkers, lost their parent. But I'm sorry that I missed so much because I love hearing Jeff talk, so I know I missed a whole lot. And but we have another mentor of mine on the phone as well, Karen Maxwell, and she's in Boston, ATU. So, Brother Khalid, you're absolutely right. Our industry has not suffered as of yet. But until we, like you said, can get clerical workers back on the job, until we get caregiver workers on the job and daycare and the things that we took for granted, those were the people that transportation really, really, truly needed. Those were the people that we transported.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying we haven't taken a hit as of yet, but if
We lost her again.
Yeah, it looks like we may have lost Karima again. She's traveling. And so that's just one of the things about traveling. You know how it is. No matter what part of the country you live in. Karima, are you back again?
or I guess so.
Okay, well, go ahead and just finish. It's
Okay.
all good.
We thought she was back.
Yeah, we thought she was back. She must got her foot on that gas pedal kind of heavy down there. I don't know. Sis, you better slow down a little bit. Or we need to speed up.
Well, once again, with the workers, I just need us and need you guys to assist in Black workers understanding their power, understanding, how much force we have if we gather together. But
Okay. Well, we lost Karima again, and she's gonna get back.
having
Oh, there we go. Okay.
so having you guys would be very, very valuable, where we could have our own round table, to bring Blacks in. So I apologize.
No, no, no. Listen, I know you're traveling. You say you have another colleague who's a part of this discussion. If possible, maybe we can have her come in at some point so she could support. If she's
Karen.
Karen, is her name
Karen
Karen?
Maxwell.
Karen Maxwell. Let me see if I can get Karen Maxwell somehow or another. And okay.
She's another first for her local as well.
Okay, I'm going to promote Karen Maxwell to the status of a panelist. Is that okay?
That's absolutely fine.
Okay.
So
And
I
that
appreciate you guys, and I definitely will be on the next call, steady and in one space.
okay. Hey, Sister Karima, no need to apologize. I know how it is. And I know that within the transportation industry, I'm sure this would apply nationwide, and perhaps Brother Jeff can speak to this a little later on. But I know that here locally within Pittsburgh and Allegheny County area, you guys have experienced several deaths of transportation workers due to COVID-19. So could you speak to that perhaps?
We just buried our third operator
Mm.
and here in Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate. Again, I hope I was able to. Yes, Karen Maxwell. Okay, I was able to add her on as a panelist so she could help as we deal with this conversation. Um, Before the pandemic, what were some of the issues and challenges faced by the workers in your industry, in your occupation? Jeffrey spoke to part of it. He talked about the lack of representation, the lack of Black representation at the top, perhaps middle management on up. Is that what you're speaking of, Jeff?
Yes, yes. We have when you're talking about the workers on our level, where you talk about the drivers, mechanic, paratransit division, um, you have a lot of them that look like us. But then when you start moving up to different positions, to higher than mid-level supervisors, um, they start not to look like us. So they're willing to keep you at a certain level, but they don't believe you can go any higher. And I believe the best education you can get, like I said, I've been here almost 34 years. There's nothing in transportation that you can't tell me about. So I have a PhD, even though I went to the University of Wisconsin for business education, but I
Mhm.
have a PhD with not a certificate, but by the work I've done
Mhm.
in transportation. So why not use the people like a Karen Maxwell or a Karima or a Maurice Wolford as a carpenter, or you, Mr. Khalid, in your business? Why not use the people who's been doing this, who can educate the other people? And they don't want to move people up. And you know, Karen was a great person to bring on because she's doing a great job in Boston at local 589, trying to do the same thing that we're trying to do here, trying to educate people, trying to get us to move up in the industry. Why can't you be the supervisor? Why can't you be the boss? But they look at us, and I think part of it is our fault. Maybe I shouldn't say this on the discussion, but I had somebody tell me, say, Jeff, you're the most qualified, but we need somebody else that looks like the other person. And that person looked like us. So
Mm.
we need a mixture. And I said, there's nothing wrong with that. But why would you downplay your own people? Why would you downplay your own people? So we got to get this out of our head and our mentality to let us know we are somebody. We are a strong people. We are educated people. We can do anything. I mean, look at some of the inventions that was made. Most of the things that was made, you talk about hearts and plasma and light, all this different stuff came from the African American people. We have a lot of knowledge, even down to this from Pfizer with this shot. We had an African
Mhm.
American lady who helped create this.
Mhm. In terms of like the vaccines itself, right?
That's itself.
Right. Yeah. Right. Right. You make a very good point. Unfortunately, many people think that the Africans, our ancestors who were enslaved, were like a blank slate. Like
Yeah,
they were captured, they were enslaved, and then they were taught how to be field hands or taught how to be domestics within the slave master's home. And that's all they actually knew. But that's completely false. We know that the Africans who were enslaved came from various backgrounds. Some were farmers, some were warriors, some were scholars, some were scientists. So they had a lot to bring to the table, even as enslaved people.
yes,
And,
sir.
and, and then as the years went on, they also were able to adapt to the environment, and they were able to transfer those skills and the knowledge that they had from the ancestral homeland into the domestic homeland that we call the United States of America, or specifically the southern part of the United States of America.
Yes, sir.
So they were very talented and they were very skilled to begin with. The other point, and I think this is part of what you're alluding to, is that oftentimes enslaved African people would invent things, but there was a law against them being recognized. So they
Yes,
couldn't receive any recognition via a patent. Oftentimes, those patent rights and those patent privileges and the royalties would go to the slave master or go to a corporation or business that was created by the slave master and his or her associates. So we are a very determined, strong, and creative and resilient people. That is without doubt. let's talk about some of the special challenges faced by folks within your industry before the pandemic. Jeff, you made reference to how when you get to middle management and above, there seems to be some type of ceiling or some type of wall. What might it look like within your industry if that didn't exist?
What are some of the unique challenges and experience you and other workers are dealing with? That's where we are, right?
Hey, we could go there too.
Where were you at?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
two. Yeah, number two, that's fine.
Okay. Some of the challenges that I'm experiencing here might be a little off topic. An experience with our workers are dealing with due to COVID-19. Um, I'm having a lot of problems with a lot of our people are getting COVID. They're getting sick. We had one person, one of my board person, I'm sorry, just passed away a week ago. So that was the first one I lost. But
Mm.
daycare problems, their children not going to school, not being able to work. And with the government only giving them 14 days um, to be off, or if they're giving them the FMLA to be off and they're paying them 2/3 of their pay, when that runs out, the government in this last bill did not put it back in to cover people off. So I have been taking people now and giving them leave of absences. So it's a challenge where they're not getting income because, or they have to use their sick days or their vacation times. So a lot of people is now I'm having to put them through EAP. And what we started here, we've been using, I don't use the company's EAP. It's something the international started with FTE. And I use them to put our members through because now it's a mental challenge. I
Well,
can't.
Jeff, could you please explain for the viewing and for the listening audience? I know what EAP is, and I have a hint as to what FMLA is, but could you explain those acronyms and terms for us?
So Family Medical Leave Act. If you have regular Family Medical Leave Act, it gives you up to 12 weeks to care for any spouse, children, mother, father, or yourself. Anybody that you're the caretaker of, the primary caretaker, you can get up to 12 weeks. But in order to qualify for those 12 weeks with the regular FMLA, you have to be in work 1,250 hours the year before. I'm just remembering all this off the top of my head, so I'm just trying to rattle through this. You have to be in work 1,250 hours the year before to even qualify for FMLA. If you get the special FMLA, which provides, due to COVID, which provides for child care or the schools closing, you have to be home. It's not separate. So they combine in those whole 12 weeks together. So you might have had FMLA because of a sick parent or you're sick. And now you got to use this 12 weeks and they're combined in it. And they're only paying you 66 and 2/3 pay. What happens after that? You have to try to use your own time or they just excuse you without pay. And it caused stress on the African American family. And what I'm dealing with, a lot of single women that might not have a spouse there or might not have parents, and they don't have no choice. They don't have a daycare provider or somebody else who can take care of their loved ones or their children. So I'm getting them out on excused absences. It's not going against them, but it's causing very problem. So EAP is something where FAT, let me use FTE. It's just like EAP. They go out if you have behavioral problems, if you have drug problems, if you're on stress, um, you're not feeling well, you can't cope, you're scared with COVID-19, you're scared to come to work. It's people, you can go see a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and they walk you through it. They walk you through it. They can get you off from work. Um, a lot of times it's without pay, um, but they keep you off from work and they try to walk you through it. Um,
And it helps you. It helps you also, based on my understanding of EAP programs. EAP stands for Employee Assistance Program. My experience is that you are able to retain your job, and so that's a major benefit. And this is something that was very important for people now, but especially back in the day, people who had issues around substance abuse, or people who were vets returning from the war who had some issues, perhaps like a stress syndrome, or they had some mental health issues. And you wanted these people to stay on the job, but you also recognized that they needed to get some help for the things that were bothering them. And so they were able to tap into a EAP program. And EAP programs are not guaranteed. This is something that I do believe, and you all can help me with this. I think this is something that unions have to bargain for. You have to fight for this. It's not guaranteed.
No, it's not guaranteed. So what we created here also created a light duty program to help get some of these people back to work. So what the light duty program is, they can come, they can sit, and they can get their 40 hours pay. They might have to stay in open doors or file papers. But I had to create something, but I only could get so many spots to help our African American people, with the challenges to get back to work, where we can move them around. Okay, I can't get nobody to work during the day. I mean, to keep my child during the day, but I got somebody at night, or I can't get somebody, I have to keep them. So I was able to get somebody to work at night. Whatever I had to do to help our African Americans, especially our African American women, with these children being alone. Then we got a lot of men who then stepped up to the plate. Our men are great. We got some great African American men who stepped up to the plate that's doing the same thing with their child, or both parents are working. So we had to try to be creative to help our membership out. And that's what we're trying to do, to be creative, to take some of these challenges and away from people dealing with this COVID-19.
Brother Reese, let me ask you, as a carpenter, what are some of the different challenges and experiences within your field, within your industry since COVID? Are there any? If there have been, could you speak about it, speak to it?
To be honest with you, other than a lumber shortage in July, no. And a lot of those issues I haven't had to deal with, quite honestly, since I decided not to deal with these people a few years ago.
So since you walked away from the union that you belonged to before, is that
right?
Okay.
No doubt about it. I mean, while I was in it for the 9 years, I only averaged working half a year anyway. And there was a lot more good came out of it than bad. I will say that. I don't knock anybody for, making it through and making a career out of it and gathering a pension. People got families and kids, and everybody's situation is different. I understand that. But so just speaking from my own experience, that's all I can do. So personally for me, it was since I've been an independent contractor, it's been a little bit of an economic roller coaster, but my mental health has been substantially improved. How about that? I can live with that. I can tell you that, because it was too much relying on them, asking them, waiting on them. You know what I mean? And they
when you say them, could you give us a little bit more clarification? Because I think a lot of people, we can make some assumptions, Brother Reese, but I think you need to spell it out. I mean, what was it that drove you to move away from this particular union that you have been affiliated with for all of these years? What were the circumstances? What were the conditions? What was it that contributed to the bad state of mental health that you were going through, that at this point you've now found some relief? Could you share that with the audience, please?
In my experience there, through the apprenticeship and even through the 4 or 5 years of journeyman, I noticed that it was, on every job site, there would only be one, maybe two of us there. You know what I mean? Black people there. And, there was enough of us in the union that I didn't think it had to be that way. It was almost like they dished us out in sparsity, you know, on these job sites, sort of kept us separated
Mhm.
as members of the union, but not on the same job site, you know.
Mm.
And this was in the carpenters union. I just noticed it, you know, because every time we did link up, cross paths, we would always, you know, exchange information because that's just the way it was. There was we thought there were so few of us in there, and there really wasn't a ratio, but not so little that we shouldn't have had a really nice click within the union. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
even the people that were at the top at the carpenters, I mean, there was only one, and I mean, you could, I mean, the man was a sellout. You know what I mean? I can't spell it out any. You know, I'm not gonna make it complicated. I guess he, you know, I don't know. I ain't gonna.
So did you guys have a black caucus within that particular carpenters union?
No, we had what, one guy that was a business agent, and all they
Mm-hmm.
do is, you know, pull the strings on who gets work and where, and you know, that's where the control of the how long you work and who you work for. That's that apparatus there within that organization. And there was one guy, I didn't even get most of my work from him, but he was there, you know, I don't know, keep the black people under control guy. He wasn't an authoritative guy, but he was the only black representation we had within that body.
Within their body. So it also sounds as if, based on what you just described, that there was serious tokenism, and there also was a serious effort to keep you all divided in order to keep you all conquered. So you said there was a number of you scattered, but you all were just that. You were scattered. You had no black caucus. You weren't organized, and it sounds like you were purposefully and intentionally kept apart from one another. Again, I mean, that's one of the things that can happen when people go out of their way to keep another group of people powerless. Because we all know that with unity, there certainly is power, and the more numbers that you have, perhaps the greater your impact.
That's right.
So the carpenters union, I look at a lot of the trade unions in certain cities and areas around the country. I had a chance to do some research on like the trade unions, the construction unions up in New York, and some folks that came together and started something called Black Workers Matter, right? And they had put out a poster about 4 or 5 years ago, and maybe I can pull it up a little later. But they profiled the heads of all the construction trades throughout New York State, and it was pathetic. Just about every last one was a white male. Matter of fact, the poster was called like white male. It was called white, pale, and stale, right? And they had a profile of all these different heads of all the different construction trades, basically all white men. Here within Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, they have a consortium of the leaders of different construction trades as well. My research has revealed that, uh, at least based on the photos that they have released, uh, the same type of dynamic, white men. When I look at the names appear to be the names of traditional ethnic white populations, mostly Italian, Irish, which could be people of color, or European, as we all know, Eastern Europeans. But again, when I try to match up the names with the faces, I basically get a preponderance of white men. So that seems to be the trend, that in these cities, these uh, what I call these old colonial cities, these old colonial states like the New York, the Pennsylvania, so forth and so on, the construction trades are dominated by white males. And that appears to be one of the reasons that there's so little work for black males and black females and other people of color. In my
Yes.
travels, I've seen some variation, like traveling, for example, down south. I'll see a few more blacks, especially in certain parts of Georgia. When you get close to Atlanta, and you get close to the Atlanta suburbs from time to time, you'll see more black and brown faces. In the Southwest, certainly coming through places like Texas or coming through Arizona. But on the East Coast, it's that same old story. And I would probably say the East Coast to the Midwest is the same old story. It's lock and load on white men controlling all the construction work, leading all the councils about building, construction trades.
Yes.
Could you all speak to that based on your observations and based on your experience? Brother Reese, we can start with you.
Well, it's kind of hard for me to say. It's abstract. I just when I was in the union, I mean, it provided a lot of benefits on paper, but like I said, I just advocate get the education no matter how you can. So I appreciate people like Brother Jeffrey and yourself and Sister Karima. And everybody's just gonna have to choose what they do with it. You know what I mean? I just happen to choose to try to separate away from dealing with anything and everything white owned and controlled to the best of my ability, and that involves a lot of discipline and a lot of out of the way. And I mean, this includes labor and everything. Now through no real effort for the last 3 years, it just happened to work out this way. I haven't had to work for anybody else but our own people, except for on 2 small occasions, and they were referrals from friends of ours. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And like I said, everybody's different. I just may have, for myself anyway, found a little bit of way, a little bit of space to decompress, because being involved and wrapped up and reliant on the Caucasians' way of anything and everything has been, deeply a psychologically abusive relationship to all of us. Let's just be honest.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So
you're right.
I personally just may have found a little bit of a space in my life at this time anyway, to decompress from that. So my answer to a lot of these questions is I don't want to deal with it with them anyway. I try to be as holistic as I can, and that involves in who I deal with and who I do business with. Now, I'm not saying I won't take their money if they offer me a contract, but they ain't really dishing them out. And we're talking about a pattern of behavior, no matter the pathology, their sociology. There's not a treaty they haven't broken. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times you're all right. Work under a contract. I don't disagree with that. At least you got that. You know what I'm saying? And, but I don't deal with these people. And I would love to have something built to where we had our own solid foundation and our own labor apparatus, to where we didn't have to even have to congregate amongst them, because I mean, they're usually, the relationship goes like this. They're usually invited to our parties, but we ain't invited to theirs.
Exactly.
Because it's just our nature to be a welcoming and, tender-hearted people. That's honest, being honest. It's not so much in their nature, and that's for another conversation, maybe a whole nother Zoom meeting, because that's a long topic. But notwithstanding, I mean, there are some white folks that practice doing good. They're at practice, trying to get perfect. But I just don't think it's that time anymore. And we don't have any allies in the world. I can't think of another group that can say that for themselves. I mean, I could be wrong, but off the top of my head, I think that Black people here in America were the only group without an ally. I mean, Italians got their home country and all these other groups, you name it, even the Hispanics, Asians, you know what I mean? The Jews, they turned something into a religion into a race. I mean, it's just, but we're the only one that have no allies. So I'm operating off of the principle of treat others the way that, they treat you. And if that's how they're going to treat us, then in my life and the little space that I take up in the world, that's how I'm going to treat them. But I'm going to do it with respect. As long as they don't come try to bother me, I won't bother them.
Well, that's understandable, Brother Reese. And I will say this, we do have some allies. We have some allies here domestically, and we have some allies internationally. Unfortunately, just like us, most of the folks who have allied themselves with us are also going through either oppression or exploitation or both. And so, we have to search, we have to build alliances where there's possibilities for those alliances to exist. We have to develop coalitions where there are some possibilities for coalitions to exist and to expand. But yes, Karen Maxwell, she had her hand up, and I definitely welcome your comments. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I appreciate you all adding me to the panel. Uh, I know Jeff and Karima personally, strong union leaders, work hard in their respective areas. Um, I'm here in Boston. Been here pretty much all my life. I've been with my company 30 years, um, and have second generation when it comes to the Boston Commons Union. Both parents were bus drivers, and following the footsteps. Um, I hear Maurice, and I can understand. I'm newly elected. Well, I got a year in my local. Um, the first African American female to have ever held a position, and our union is over 112 years, and our members are 80% minority. Um, and we've held one seat, and our board consists of 10, but now 11. But as far as a minority group, we've been only able to hold one seat.
Mm,
That's a problem,
mm,
because when you have 80% of your members minority, uh, we should be holding more seats. So this
absolutely.
go around, we actually were able to take over 3 seats as minority: 2 African American, 1 Latino. That Latino is the first in the history of our local as well. So I'm looking at your talking points. After pandemic, we've had issues as a culture before the pandemic. Our
Mm,
issues were that we were able to obtain some strong seats in our authority, but they were token seats. And let me explain that. What I mean by that is we're going to give you this for the face of the position, but not the powers of the position. So here in Boston, they do that a lot. They will put you in a seat that have no powers. And when you try to make movements, that's when they juggle the puzzle pieces. And you know how that one puzzle piece you can't find? You end up missing in that puzzle. Okay. So I feel, Maurice, when it comes to allies, and it's a different way for us here in Boston to make our moves. During pandemic, we had a lot of childcare issues, as Jeff said, um, where the authority, we were 2 months in. 2 months in. Now remember, we're 80%,
mm,
80%, if not more. Um, 2 months in on this pandemic and no PPE.
mm,
Okay, we had to go out as a union and purchase it with our own monies, and it was a lot to get it out to the members. you know. And then when it went public that that's what we did, the authorities started to step up. When they were talking about granting all this money, the authorities started to step up. But now that we're, you know, fast forward, now that we're in this pandemic and we're fighting for the protection of our members, because now you want to discipline them for not being there. The anxiety, the anxiety alone from catching COVID, driving these buses up and down these streets, and the lack of consideration for the fact that we have families at home. You want us to go out here on the front lines. You don't want to protect us. And then when we catch it, you're telling us that you didn't catch it. You didn't catch it from being at work, but when they do the contact tracing, you got 12 of us in one area that all caught it from one individual that was too afraid to stay home in lieu of discipline. So they don't want to make this a workers' comp issue because they're saying, oh, you can't prove where you actually contracted it from. But then when we start doing these disciplines and seeing who is being targeted, well, they say, oh, well, that's nothing. You all are the majority here. But you cannot tell me that my coworker who does not look like me contracted it, was home for, say, over 14 days. I'm home for 16 days and you're bringing me in for discipline and you're not bringing in the one I caught it from. So we have a bigger issue here in Boston. I'm not saying bigger than any other transit authority, but race is definitely a factor when we start looking at things, you know, and just in my own local with me trying to voice things and get in a movement. And I hate to say this, but I will because we're being very rarely transparent here, is I have to go to some of my board members who don't look like me and say, hey, why don't you ask this question at our next e-board meeting? Because I know they'll listen to it and it gets points across. So we have a great problem, whether it's just working at the authority or just being an executive board member here in Boston. It's unfortunate. And I'm appreciating this platform that you all have because hopefully we can grow it so that the listening ears could also become educated with what we're trying to do or what needs to be done and their input on how it can help. So I really appreciate this forum and this platform. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate your comments, Karen. Very well spoken and very well taken as well. You know, and when I say we, I'm talking about this particular union, this independent Black union. We came about specifically to address these type of issues, not just from the vantage point of benefits or collective bargaining, but the workers as members of families, the workers as extensions of those families, the workers as members and representatives of neighborhoods, of communities. So we're not just a union that is structured to deal with issues around collective bargaining. We are a union that is structured to become that advocate. You know, think of us as the civil rights component to a labor movement. Think of us as the civil rights component to this issue around collective bargaining. It's not just what's in the best interest of the worker within the workplace, but that worker is part of a family. That worker is part of a neighborhood. That worker is part of a larger community. And as Black folks or folks of African descent, that worker is part of a national community that is looked upon as a collective and that is dealt with collectively. You know, this is something that we always struggle to convey to mainly our people, that even though we walk around and we see ourselves as individuals, which we are, but when it comes to the society, this society, the way that they deal with you as an individual is based upon your identification with the collective. So it doesn't matter to the police if they pull you over, they don't check to see whether you have a PhD or you have a GED. They don't care whether you're part of the Black elite or you're part of the Black working class. They pull you over primarily for reasons based on your skin color, based on your melanin, based on what they perceive to be of your African origin. And so you get stopped by the police. And perhaps if they recognize you as a celebrity or as a public official, or someone who demands their respect or caution, then perhaps they'll deal with you a little differently. So we're not dealt with just as individuals based on our, individual characteristics. We're looked upon as being members of a collective, as a national Black collective. And so one of the reasons for us putting this particular union together is to do the things that can remedy and better the collective conditions of our people, right? It's not just about collective bargaining. It's not just about dollars and cents. It is about benefits, but it's about the benefits of not just the worker. It's about the benefits of that worker's family, that worker's neighborhood, and that worker's overall community and well-being. Um, let me ask some other questions. Let's move down here to number 4 and then number 5. Has there been any organized response from your union or labor leaders regarding COVID-19, its economic impact and worker safety? I think Karen spoke to the situation in Boston very well. It sounds like her union or elements within her union, herself and others, they moved forward to try to do what they thought was best. And then true to form, public officials and some politicians probably came behind to try to clean it up out of embarrassment. It sounds like out of embarrassment and also to save face. But can anyone else speak to that? What has been the organized response, say, for example, from the union or the labor leaders in transportation, the transit workers union? And what about the issues around police misconduct, the shootings and killings of Black people by the police, and the lack of accountability? What has been the reaction? What has been the response from labor leaders and from union representatives in your areas, in Boston, in New York, and so forth? Anyone can speak.
Well, as far as here in our union, like I said, I was safety is something that I speak about quite often within our local. You can always, for anything, use the word safety. So I made sure as an African American, because they say we were the one most susceptible to getting the COVID-19. So even far as the shields, if the shields didn't come on the bus, I had our ATU members in the garages make shields, retrofit them to the
Mm.
buses, and make shields to cover our employees. Like I said, I went out and we bought the sanitizers, we bought the masks. I mean the gloves. I'm sorry, and then the company followed suit, and they did. We didn't have to wait months and months and months to get these things, but we were proactive instead of reactive. Because if we would have been reactive, I believe a lot more people could have perished or had
Mm.
COVID here in Buffalo, New York. So we had to be proactive. So even with our board, Karen is doing a wonderful job. And it's good that in 589 we had somebody like herself who would speak up and that looks like us. Because like she said, the same thing here, 80 to 90% of our membership looks like us.
Mm.
But when you sit on the union board, I have me, my recording secretary, three, four of us out of 15 to 16, besides a few of my stewards that look like me. And
Mm.
so I had to be, like I said, proactive and still instead of reactive. The company came aboard. I had to get them to cut the seats off, to move the line back where people can stand, make sure we were using the back door, cut down the capacity on the buses to 15 people because we couldn't have them all up front, to make sure if they wasn't wearing their mask, they couldn't ride, because it was about the safety of our membership, make sure everything was done right. And then when you speak about police brutality, uh, that's um that's a whole different ball game right there. Because I look at it like this: we had a police officer um, that went to school with me who
Mm.
was stopping a white officer from beating up a black individual, excessive force, and she ended up getting terminated and fired. And it's called the Carolyn's Law. You're probably seeing that, it's been on national TV.
Yes, yes, I have.
And it's she went to school with me, and she's now fighting to try to at least get her pension and get what's due to her. She'd have been on the force 20 something years, and she was just protecting another African American from excessive force, and she's the one get terminated, and she's an officer. It shows you, and that officer actually punched her in the face. You know, it's really sad of what's going on. We get treated different if you get pulled over by the police. It's different, you know. Um, you just got to be so careful. I look at what happened in the Capitol building, unbelievable to me. How many lives would have been lost just for just breaking that window? They're walking in, sitting on seats like it's okay. It's not okay.
True.
Not okay.
Well, sir, the situation that you mentioned, how the minority rules over the majority amongst your union, that's just how they roll. And
Yeah.
that behavior up the Capitol, they're the only people that's ever actually turned their firearms on their own country. That's just how they roll.
Yeah.
You know, this is just the kind of people, you know, this is the mentality. You know, they don't make sick movies like The Purge for nothing. They set up the mentality. These, you know what I mean? And once I realized myself that it's, you know, just how mental a lot of this is, dealing with everything, because every facet of our life is either dominated or controlled or manipulated by one system. All roads lead back to it. And participating with it, I mean, there's no other people in the world, I don't think, that could go through it other than us. That's why we're, you know, so chosen. You know what I mean? It's just, I
So,
don't know.
yeah. So, if we could just lend a little bit more perspective to what Brother Maurice is describing. For us, we define that as white supremacy, right? We define the economic injustice. We define the economic injustice, the lack of representation, um, the uh, the disregard for Black life, the promotion of white life over any other life, even though it's all life. We define all of that basically as characteristic of the system of white supremacy. The system of white supremacy that gives more value to um, the, the lives of white people compared to the lives of Black people and others. The system of white supremacy, when it plays itself out, has no problem in promoting unqualified white people to manage stuff instead of promoting better qualified or the most qualified Black and brown people to manage stuff. The system of white supremacy has no problem with what we define as disproportional representation, where the members of your group or make up over 80%, but when you look at that representation, it's not there. It's not matched in terms of leadership, in terms of management. You know, one of the things that we believe in is proportional representation. So, say for example, like the situation up in Buffalo, the situation in Boston, if 80% of your workforce is made up of people of color, then that should be represented in terms of your management, in terms of your leadership. But white supremacy won't advance that. White supremacy will always try to control, contain, and to stifle that type of process from actually happening. So it's there, it's real. And so just as our ancestors worked very hard in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s to dismantle Jim Crow, especially the Jim Crow that was prevalent and dominant in many southern states, in the Jim Crow, not by law, but by social practice that was prevalent and dominant in many of the Midwestern and Northern states. What do we do today in 2021 and moving forward. What can we do to dismantle white supremacy? To dismantle white supremacy when it comes to our workplaces, when it comes to the unions, when it comes to contracts, when it comes to benefits, when it comes to overall mental health of our people and the social health and economic and political health of our communities and neighborhoods. So that's the question. That's not listed, but just throwing it out there. Some feedback.
Well, I'm an 80s baby. I could just say for people around my age group, it seemed like our last generation really didn't teach a whole lot to us. And that's something that we definitely got to do, because this is a generational fight that we will win as long as we stay persistent. But, you know, you don't want to fall trap to taking participation in the failure of the next generation. That's only one answer to it, because there is, there's no one answer. There's, several of them, but that's just one.
So what I hear from you, Maurice, is we have to teach, we have to educate, and we have to be persistent.
That's a part of it.
Okay.
There's there's more to it than that. But so everything I do, I try to put that energy into teaching my brothers and sisters, because I ain't got no children. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Can I say something? I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Karen. Jump in.
I'm a 60s. I'm a 60s baby, and we come from an era where everything was spoken in the house and not in the street, right? Um, Educating within and educating your own, and then asking critical questions of my parents, especially in the profession that I'm in. And I found so many it just was wrong. And they was like, well, if you don't do anything about it, you're part of the problem, right?
Mm, mm,
If you stand by and you see that it's wrong and you keep your mouth closed, you become part of the problem. And I agree with Maurice when he says, you don't want to be part of the failure of the next generation. So I do have children, 3 of them, and trying to educate them on labor. They were just upset that I was always on a bus. You know what I mean? Raising
mm-hmm.
my kids. Um, so they just seen it as just a bad thing, not understanding. Listen, this is what's educating you privately. This is what's bringing you forward to now. I have 3 strong-minded children, and that was not easy to teach with what they were learning in school, which things were wrong in school, um, having that inherited privilege that they did not inherit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being around, going to private schools, being around kids that don't look like them, and their kids saying, how did you get here? Are you on a scholarship? How do you,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just the hard work. So when you look at police brutality, my kid's father is police officer, law enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
um, and he's going through it right now. He's having a hard time because you have those bad apples that fell off the tree and they keep being ripened somehow. You
Mm-hmm.
can't get rid of the bad apples, and now all of the apples on the tree are just as bad as that bad apple.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he doesn't want to walk around in uniform anymore. He, complete before he used to just put a jacket on. Now he takes his uniform off completely before he comes home. If he has to stop at the store, no matter what he's doing, because even though we want to stop this brutality, not all of them are engaging in that. But when you see a police officer in uniform, it's just no nice words coming their way. It's really, really bad. So I'm on both sides of the spectrum when you're looking at the police misconduct. You know what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
wrong, it's hurtful, and it's emotional, because I see police officers emotionally scarred from this, and they don't have anywhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
They're out here protecting us and themselves. more than normal protecting themselves from being, just attacked. They don't like sitting in cruisers anymore. They don't know if someone's going to walk up along the side of them and shoot them. So I'm on both sides of that. It's an emotional process.
Well, thank you for that. And I think you raised some other issues that perhaps we don't address, right? We really haven't talked about it too much here, but what is the role of the police, and how do we deal with the Black police officers, and how do they deal with the Black community? Um, the police union in this country is one of the most powerful unions in the world. It's certainly one of the most powerful unions here within the United States. I'm talking about uh, the FOP, and then you have other smaller police unions. You have the Police Benevolent Association, which I believe um, is pretty dominant throughout Boston. I know it's dominant in parts of New York and New Jersey. In Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and other places, the dominant union is the Fraternal Order of Police, or the FOP. And the FOP is the dominant police union throughout the United States. It's very powerful. It has a very strong lobby. Some people, and I'm one of those people, I actually think that police unions, certainly the FOP, needs to be decertified as a union because of what it has allowed to happen. So yeah, I do agree with you, Karen. We shouldn't throw all the cops into the same barrel. But the bottom line is, and I'm sure your husband recognizes this now, and you've basically said it, the problems with the police it's beyond a few bad apples. This is a structural systemic issue. And it has to be addressed that way, from that vantage point. Just like we talked about our ancestors dealing with Jim Crow. It wasn't just an individual thing. Not all white people supported or participated in Jim Crow. We all know that, as people who lived during that era and as people who studied that era. But the problem of Jim Crow itself was systemic and structural, and it was codified through law, namely Plessy versus Ferguson of 1896. How do we address that kind of stuff, right? So, I would only suggest that the Black police officers do what other Black police officers have done in times before, and some are doing it today, that they stand up and they speak out against racism and white supremacy, that they stand up and they call out those police officers who brutalize people and who hurt people, right? That is one of the best ways for them to be able to stay connected or to reconnect to their own people and with their own communities. Um, but it's certainly something that has to be done, and it's certainly something we need to talk about. Police officers, the police unions, their relationship to other unions. What should that relationship look like, and how is that going to work?
They cannot turn their heads, brother and sisters. A lot of times they turn their heads. They have what they call a code.
Mm-hmm.
And they see a lot of things, but a lot of them, and I'm not saying all, because we got some awesome police officers,
Mm-hmm.
and I wouldn't want to do their job if they gave it to me. And it's a tough job, but
Mm-hmm.
they turn their heads on a lot of things. It's a code, They don't they don't tell on each other. And I'm not saying the small things. I'm talking about the big things that they
Mm-hmm.
know is wrong. If I see them kneeling on somebody's neck, and this guy can't breathe, he's already to surrender, and you keep doing it, I couldn't stand by and watch that.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
could not stand by and watch that. That's where I have problems at, where they don't speak up, they don't say anything. They just it just happens, and they think it's okay, and it's not all of them. It's not all of them. I won't say it's all, but a good majority of them, they're just standing there, and something's happening behind them, and they're busy just want to make sure the perimeter is okay, so no other people can get to where the police officer that's doing damage to an individual. Something's wrong with that picture.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So again, how do we move forward as a collective? Because again, even the Black police officers, the Black paramedics, the Black EMS, the Black firefighters, they all are judged collectively. And so we should never forget that. Sometimes the Black police officers and other folks who work in public service will go out of their way to distance themselves from the Black community as they do their job. So they know something is wrong, but they don't want to speak out. They don't want to show their disgust, because if they were to do so, it would create more alienation between them and perhaps their white colleagues or their non-Black colleagues and co-workers. How do we address those issues? Again, I would say that for Black law enforcement, for Black public servants, it's up to them. You know, they really need to come together. History should always be instructive. Sister Karen says she's a baby from the 60s. So I'll make some historical reference to the 1960s. I'm sure we all heard of Fred Hampton, Mark Clark, they were members at that time of the Black Panther Party. They got killed by the police December 1969. The police, the state attorney general, the FBI helped to orchestrate it as well. There was a Black caucus of law enforcement police officers in Chicago at that time, because this happened in Chicago. They came out and took a strong stance against the murder of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. They helped to, along with other people, to organize folks in the community to address the issue. They pushed the issue. They aligned themselves with other civil rights and human rights groups and organizations. And they were not alone. There have been Black caucuses of police officers, law enforcement people who have stood out and protested and demonstrated. Matter of fact, about 2 months ago, then this was just before the election, there was a group of Black police officers in Philadelphia who separated themselves from their union, the FOP, because their union endorsed Donald Trump for the presidency. So they went on record, and they had a couple of white cops who went with them. But the Black caucus from the FOP, or this group of Black police officers, they dissented, separated themselves, and went in a whole different direction. Black police officers have to do that in order to regain or to build trust within the Black community. They have to stand up. Just like the cops often say, if you see something, say something. What I always say to that, I just turn it and give it back to them. I said, okay, well, if you see something, you need to say something too. And that's just how that has to be. We have some stuff coming from the chat, and I like to read it, and I hope people can see it on the share screen. Brother Doug, I added you in, so if you have something that you like to say as we wind down, and let me see. I'm gonna try to read some of the stuff in the chat besides just the introductions. Just as a matter of record and for information, Karen had let us know that Bruce Foster is one of the founders of the ATU Black Caucus.
Exactly.
Okay, and Karen, again, let's remember that with our children out of school and at home, some of our members are facing issues, right? And I think you've spoken to that, and I know Jeffrey and Maurice has as well. Sister Catherine Underwood, she said, quote, "It's imperative that Black workers recognize the power that we have collectively. I know sometimes we are not always in sync with one another when going about our day-to-day lives, but we must understand our worth. If it wasn't as clear before the pandemic, it should be now. For example, I want Black workers to know that being an operator or a maintenance worker or whatever position you hold in your union, recognize that that position doesn't have to be as far as you go. We need and have always needed people who look like us to know you are worthy and just, as Jeff said. I am able and capable, for instance, of being of more than just being an operator. Strive to go higher, bigger, and better because we need us. If you reach a certain position through hard work and determination, remember to keep educating one another. Also, do all you can to preserve the position. We should always help us, even when it seems no one else is. Very true. Mel said, thank you all for your insights and comments. I have to leave now. Solidarity. And I know this particular male. Mel is a white guy who's a community organizer and activist. He also is very involved in all types of issues here in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. And so when we talk about allies, he is someone who I definitely would consider to be an ally as we deal with issues of social justice, equity, and self-determination for Black folk. Brother Doug, you can speak as well, but I'll read your comments. It says the very institutions with which we are subjected to are the keepers of white supremacy, racism, for example, education, as well as the judicial. We need capital in a capitalistic system, but in order to exist within the system, we must overlook or agree with the mistreatment of people of color. So yeah, so we need capital to make it in any type of system, whatever economic model we come up with. We need capital. But a capitalistic system, the dog eat dog part is what we have to get away from. We can't do dog eat dog individual stuff. It doesn't work for our people. It doesn't work for the vast majority of white people. And I would even venture to say that, what we saw just a few days ago in terms of what happened in Washington, D.C., is symptomatic of the crisis. And I'm going to quote a comrade of ours who belongs to another political party. It's called Ujima People's Progress Party. And I'm going to quote Brother Nnamdi Lumumba. And this is what Brother Nnamdi said. And this was a pushback against people who were describing the situation as a crisis in democracy. Brother Nnamdi said, this is not a crisis in democracy. This is a crisis in capitalism. Because a lot of the white folks that we see now who are pro-Trump supporters, believe it or not, many of those people supported Barack Obama because Barack Obama represented hope. And he represented an opportunity to have a different economic alignment. And when that didn't materialize, a lot of those people transitioned from being moderate Democrats into being supporters of Donald Trump. And so this is truly, to quote my Brother Nnamdi, this is truly a crisis of capitalism. How is this particular economic model going to continue to survive? For many years, it gave the white working class the idea that, number one, they were better than Black workers and brown workers, but it also gave them the idea and the hope that as long as they just like educate themselves, worked hard, everything would be okay. And no matter how badly things got, they would always be looked upon and be better than the so-called Negroes, right? And now the economic crisis has got to the point where it's very difficult to maintain this type of system. And I'm not going to get into all the technicalities of it, but I would just challenge the listening and the viewing audience to do this. If you want to get a glimpse of any nation's economy that's out of whack, do a basic inventory of what you have in your own home that is made by the people in your own country versus what you have in your home that's made by people from other countries, right? So just do a basic inventory. Walk around your house, walk around your apartment, and just do the inventory. Where was your TV made? Where was your VCR? Well, VCRs are over with, but where was your DVD made? Where was your laptop? Where is your computer made? What about your cell phone? What about the table that you eat your breakfast, lunch, and dinner on? What about the furniture? What about the fan? What about your air conditioning system? When you leave and you go somewhere, what about the cars that you drive? Okay, just do a little basic inventory. If the majority of things that you use on a daily basis are made somewhere else by someone other than the people within your own country, then that means that you have a serious imbalance as far as your nation's economy. And it's unsustainable. It means that a lot of jobs, a lot of work that used to be done by the people in your own country is now being done by other people in other countries. And so it means that what you have now is a consumer-based economy, almost 100% consumer-based economy that's taken a tremendous loss in terms of production. So this is indeed a period that we would call the post-industrial period of the United States. And how we're going to deal with it is going to be very interesting to see. So I'd like to read a few more comments, and then we want to open this up a little bit more. Sister Gabriel, she said, it is my understanding that police officers seeking self-care and mental health services is viewed as weak behavior. Is self-care an uplifted culture or a demeaned culture in the FOP? And that's the Fraternal Order of Police. Should we empathize with police officers that consciously allow white male chauvinistic behavior to dictate their culture? Robert said to all the panelists and attendees, capitalism is decaying, so now imperialism, neocolonialism, and fascism has to tighten its grip as capitalism falls apart. Okay, this is a very interesting analysis and comment. Not going to understand where Brother Robert is coming from. What we would do now, what we'd like to do now is to move to the last part of this, because I think we've done a very good analysis and we come up with some things that folks have done over the last several months in response to COVID-19 and in response to some of the other crises that we faced. But let's look at number 6. What types of policies or programs would you recommend? What would you recommend that labor leaders and unions do in support of advancing change and justice for Black workers and the Black community? So let's talk about some solutions, short-term solutions and long-term. Short-term could be, what would you recommend as policy, programmatic changes, say over the next 30 days to the next 12 months? In long term, we're talking about structural, systemic, and institutional changes. So let's hear, what do you all think? And people who are listening and viewing, if you could use the chat, we greatly appreciate that. And so we could introduce your suggestions and comments as well. Anyone could jump in, policies and programs that you would recommend to deal with some of the issues that we talked about.
My screen is trying to go out. Come on.
In trouble. Well, sir, I don't know about what's any specific policies, as long as it winds up with them cutting a check, and in some way working it out. I don't, we're talking about dealing with a government that rolled out $2 trillion over a weekend with no studies, no background, no hardly any trouble at all. But and has paid other groups and other people over the years, and supported other groups and other people, but not us specifically. So we can start with that and build from there. But we got to transfer some funds here some way, somehow, and it's got to be directed. Not one of those, how do they put it, rising tide statements, lifts all boats. Not trying to lift all the boats.
Trying to lift this one boat.
Yeah, trying to plug some holes in this boat and keep it rolling. You know what I'm saying?
I understand. It sounds like what you're speaking of, Maurice, is more like reparations, to be much more specific, correct?
Let's get into it.
Okay. So now that certainly would fall under a policy initiative, and certainly would have to be a long-term policy initiative. And when we say long-term, I mean, yes, you're right. In response to COVID-19, the federal government has been able to quickly pull together resources and send payments, individuals, but most importantly, it's been able to pull together resources and provide survival funding for a lot of industries and a lot of businesses and corporations. Not so much the small businesses. They've gotten a lot, but not as much as they should. But the major businesses and corporations have gotten quite a bit of money. And actually, even the local governments, the cities, the counties, the state municipalities are hurting because they haven't received as much federal dollar support as they definitely deserve and need, especially around issues of maintaining the infrastructure, for example, transportation, right? So I do agree that reparations should be on the table and something that needs to be pursued as a long-term strategy. So I definitely would agree with that. Anything else in terms of short-term stuff?
I think we should, we do a lot of mentoring now, but I'm just listening to the brother, our other brother. You know what? Why can't some of our people who millionaires and billionaires, I'm talking about our people or people with the money,
Mm-hmm.
invest into a brother like him where he can start and we can have our own apprenticeship programs?
Mm-hmm. I agree.
That's a
Because you
good
know what?
question.
That's what we need. People that looks like us that can do iron. They can be iron workers, carpenters, plumbers, electricians, and let them teach our young people. We are always going to be a journeyman and through their apprenticeship programs. And it's taking 4 or 5 years. And then they don't even use us.
Mm-hmm.
You're not even used. The only thing you're coming in to do is sign the books.
Mm-hmm.
You're just signing the books. But if we funnel some of that money into our own people and then let them start the apprenticeship program and then they can start bidding on the jobs. You know, and that's what we need to happen. Let's start, our people need to invest in our own people. And we need to stop depending on the other people to invest in our own people.
Hmm.
That's a
That's
good point. Oh, awesome. Very good points. Anyone else? Sister Karen, what do you think in terms of short-term and long-term as far as policies and programs to deal with some of the issues that you mentioned earlier?
You know, I this is a area that touches me because I know every area has an NAACP chapter. Um, but for me, the NAACP is for our people who have made it. So
Mm,
our people who haven't made it, you know, is really not. This is just me and my experience. I'm not talking about other chapters, but if you've made it, you know, you're embraced within the NAACP. And if you haven't, you know, it's really a closed door as far as programs and the enrichment of our young people. But if you're a child of a parent who has made it, well, some doors are open to you. I believe that there needs to be something done within our groups that say they're for people, the minorities. There's problems within our own groups, you know, enrich some lives in our groups and the others, well, you're going to have to work a little harder before we can even see you. So I think that if we start creating policies and programs, I think we need to check mark ourselves, you know, restructure those policies and programs that, you know, we got groups that are already established. You know, we need to start working on ourselves, you know, start taking some inventory there as far as and our unions and our memberships. We have a saying, you know, each one teach one.
mm,
Embrace these younger members that are coming up, give them the information and the tools so that they can grow within the organization, whether they choose to grow within a union or just the company that they work for. I think we need to start setting some policies that really hit the heart of where it's needed. Where it's needed. Let's you know, get in there and get our hands and our feet wet and start grabbing our youth and really embracing them and really pulling them along instead of what can I get out of it? Let's
mm-hmm.
share it. Let's share it. That's where I am.
Thank you very much for your comments. If I could, give my spin and give my interpretation on some of the comments that Karen just made. Actually, Karen touched on something that oftentimes is not talked about and is not discussed when we have conversations about the general state of affairs uh, of the Black community. Oftentimes, we don't talk about the issue of class. And when I say class, I'm not talking about, whether you eat caviar or whether you still eat pork chops. That's not it. I'm talking about class as far as your social economic relationship to the system. And we all don't share the same relationship. some of our relationships are fundamentally different compared to other members of our national Black community. Um, Again, we talk about police brutality. So if I'm in a car with Michael Jordan and Oprah Winfrey, they're sitting in the front, I'm sitting in the back, police go to pull us over because all this police officer sees, if this is one of those bad apple cops, all this cop sees is race. So he's going to pull over these 3 Black people, perhaps because he wants, or she wants to make quota, or because they had a bad day, or because they just racist people and they see an opportunity to use their power to do some harm or to cause some displeasure or distress to these 3 Black people. So when they pull us over, if they recognize Michael Jordan and if they recognize Oprah Winfrey, they're going to be treated differently. Now, I might get a break because I'm sitting in the back seat of the car that Oprah and Michael happen to be driving, right? But they're not going to look at all 3 of us the same, or they're not going to look at me the same way they would look at Oprah Winfrey and Michael Jordan. That's the class thing. And the sister's right. We need programs that are really class specific. When I say class specific, we need to zero in on those amongst us who are really the least of these, as opposed to just throwing money out there, throwing resources out there. And most of the people who benefit from it are the people who are already positioned to benefit from it, right? Maybe they have more formal education. Maybe they have more connections and contacts, right? And so they take advantage of it because their interest is not necessarily the interest of the Black collective. It may just be the interest of them. Because, we have people within our national Black community, who are selfish people. We have leaders who are selfish. We have folks in our neighborhoods. We have folks in our communities who are predators. And I'm not just talking about the predators that, that we know about through media stereotype. I'm not talking about the guys out there selling drugs or the people out there doing the stick-ups. I'm not just talking about them. We have other predators within the Black community. We have people who are poverty pimps. We have people who are corporate placeholders, right? We have people who are, political disc jockeys in the sense that they have political offices. They've either been elected or they've been appointed, but they're basically just disc jockeys. All they do is spin for the ruling class and spin for white supremacy to keep our people always spinning in the wrong direction. So we got all those elements within the Black community. But just as Karen mentioned, what about those people, man, who are really hurting and suffering? What are we going to do about those people? Those are the people who are really in the most need of the organizing skills and talents and the information that we have. And Karen is absolutely correct. We have to identify those groups of people, right? And we have to make a serious effort to educate them, especially the young people, and to serve as mentors, not for profit, not for some type of glory, but we need to do it because it's the right thing to do. And it's the right thing to do that's going to help us collectively as Black people in our city, our county, our state, and across the country. Someone else has some other comments as we move forward, and we're about to close soon. Any other ideas in terms of policies and programs? Brother Doug, I had checked your box so you can make some comments if you're still there.
Yeah, I'm here, but I'm at work, so
okay.
and
I
there's
got
people
you.
around.
Okay.
So I don't want to comment on certain things. I'm already viewed as a radical, so
hey. What else is new? Okay, listen, Sister Gabby raised her hand. Let me see if I can get Gabby here and let me see. Okay, Gabby, you should be able to make some comments if you like. I think you want to give it a try. Okay, Gabby, you want to speak?
All right, can you hear me,
Yes,
Brother
we can hear
Khalid?
you. Yes, we can.
All
Loud and
right, all
clear.
right. How's everybody?
We're
Thank you so
fine.
much for having this discussion is great. I had just made a comment about uh, first of all, dismantling long term, right? Dismantle the foundation community and that whole money laundering scheme that they got where we work for them at their corporations and then they get to write that off and give it through their foundation giving and they get to clean it up through the IRS, right? But that's long term. Short term, there should be some type of nonprofit review board. And I know here in the city of Pittsburgh, or some type of foundation review board in our cities, because the U.S. spoke about poverty pimps. Well, it just happened to me personally with Bridgeway Capital and advancing Black arts, right? I got funded, but I only got $500 for my workforce development program that actually is doing the work of employing Black people in the arts. Well, Bridgeway Capital got $25,000 for advancing the field, which was the program I applied for, and they don't. They are unsuccessful. Their workforce development program is unsuccessful. I went to 7800 Susquehanna, which is the location where
Mm-hmm.
Bridgeway Capital does their workforce development program for African American startups. And it is all white space businesses down there. The only Black space business is Knott's Land, and she moved out. She is in Wilkinsburg Borough now. And then there is only one other Black business in there, and he's a poverty pimp. It's a construction company who
Mm-hmm.
claims to hire Blacks when he hires Mexicans to
Hmm.
build
Mm-hmm.
our houses in the Black
Mm.
community. And so these are the people who are getting our money. Bridgeway Capital just did it amidst COVID. I'm struggling to pay my Black workers who are artists. That's why
Mm-hmm.
I applied to Advancing Black Arts. But Bridgeway Capital gets it. They get the 25,000, and I get disrespected. They listed my name on the website and even gave the amount and my project. It's the same project, and I actually helped Bridgeway Capital's project because I talked to those white people who own those businesses that are supposed to be for African Americans, and they told me we're having a hard time employing people. And I said, well, I guess you are. So I even shared with them I could help engage and bridge that gap for them. So I work with those business owners, yet Bridgeway Capital got the 25,000. So I say all that to say that some type of task force really expeditiously has to be formed, because it's happening all around us. Even in our gentrification process, we have a lot of poverty pimps who call themselves CDC when really they are not building anything except what benefits their pockets. And
The
Mm-hmm.
so
poverty. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, that's okay, because it was at the Census Bureau meeting where I had to actually get very upset at one of the foundations that takes our state dollars, Poise Foundation. It's a African American foundation, and they are an intermediary for District 9 dollars, because in Pittsburgh we block granted up our state dollars, right? So, and people voted for that. They wanted that. They said it was for transparency. Well,
Mm-hmm.
there's no
Mm-hmm.
transparency now because the intermediaries are not being transparent, like Poise Foundation, who denied our nation's oldest Black Arts Festival funding, and it's in District 9. How did you turn state dollars into a competitive grant? And so I know that's a problem here in the city of Pittsburgh that I know short term we could actually resolve if we create some type of task force.
Okay, well, that's a very good suggestion. What I also like to do is to read your comments too, because I think they're very on point. Um, and then I'd like to go back and read some comments that Brother Doug had made. Um, Gabriel said, quote, long term, we must dismantle the money laundering mechanisms of the IRS and foundation community. Short term, we should create a foundation task force to monitor and create increased transparency and accountability in the foundation giving community to stop misrepresented and misallocated funding. Bridgeway Capital, a lender for African American startups in Pittsburgh, PA, has just received $25,000 from Advancing Black Arts, which is a grant program of the Pittsburgh Foundation for their workforce development program. However, Bridgeway Capital's workforce development program has only created majority white space businesses and have been unsuccessful at employing residents in the African American community that they say they serve. We have to hold Advancing Black Arts and Bridgeway Capital accountable for this misrepresented and misappropriated funding, because this isolated situation happens too often. It's a very good point, very well stated, very well presented again. So again, the importance of us coming together, having these type of discussions, talking about short-term, long-term approaches, supporting one another, supporting the numerous Black caucuses, where they do exist. If they don't exist, supporting people who want to create a caucus within their union. And also we encourage everybody to join this union, New African Workers Union, as well. I want to go back and read Brother Doug's comments. Quote, diverse leadership within already established unions can get the ball rolling in the area of supporting independent political platforms, but the foundation to breaking the mold in place is supporting radical Black political education. We have to educate ourselves, and we have to educate ourselves to look outside of the box. And I do agree with what Brother Doug is presenting. Any other comments as we close out? This has been an excellent discussion. I really enjoyed, and I'm learning, because I'm taking notes. I'm talking to you guys. I'm taking notes as far as what you recommend, policies, programs, everything from reparations long-term to the funding, generating and organizing capital funds for our own apprenticeship programs, to being able to pull together much more class-specific programs and policies for the least of us, mentoring as well as youth focus, and putting together some type of review and assessment process for nonprofits in the foundation community to make sure that monies that are needed get to the people who are doing the work and get to the people who need and who can get the most benefit from those funds. So let me look again and see if there are any other comments that perhaps I missed or we missed. And it's approximately 10 minutes after 2. So we're basically on schedule. We got started about 10, 15 minutes late. And that's really on me, not being on top of the technology the way that I should have been. I thought I had it right, but apparently I didn't. Any other comments, any closing comments as we wind down for this afternoon?
I have a question if I'm being heard.
Yes, Brother Doug.
Yes, sir. Did you record this? Because I missed a great portion of this as I was preparing to get to work.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, it's being recorded, and it should be on Facebook Live as well, I do believe.
Excellent. Thank you, brother.
Oh, well, thank you. Appreciate it. Any other closing comments as we wind down?
I just want to say thank you for having me on. I got to scoot, but I really appreciate it. This was well worth it, well worth my Saturday. So just thanks again.
Oh, hey, Brother Jeffrey Richardson, thank you. We're honored with your presence and honored with your wisdom and your insight. And the same thing with Sister Karen. Thank you for stepping in and stepping up to the plate. You hit a home run, right?
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate being invited as a panelist. And like I said, I work with Jeff and Karima, and all of us together, we're a force to be reckoned with. We just have to believe in what we're doing. So absolutely. I appreciate the invite. I really do. It's a great forum. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you. And Brother Maurice, this brother here is a very dynamic and insightful and very conscientious brother. And we really appreciate your insight, brother. And we're going to work hard to, break this barrier that exists here. And again, I don't know all the numbers. I don't know all the specifics, but I can give you the general picture of what exists here in Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania or Southwestern PA. And I'm sure you'll find the same situation or similar situations in Boston, Massachusetts, in Buffalo, New York, and in other places around the country. especially those old East Coast cities, you know, those old colonial cities and states. There's a lot of construction going on. Now, this is during the pre-COVID period, and I'm sure it's going to pick up again at some point. A lot of construction projects, many of these construction projects are being funded completely or partially by federal dollars, right? And when you just just casually check out the workforce, you will see it just jumps out at you. Not many Black people working on these construction sites, all types of people working, but not many Black people, right? And you know, we're talking about cities where you have substantial Black populations. And when I say substantial, I mean anywhere from, you know, 10 to 15% plus, right? Pittsburgh's Black population fluctuates now between 25 and maybe, you know, 27, 28%, right? I don't know what the percentage of the Black population is in Boston or up in Buffalo, New York. But in other cities around the country, especially up and down the East Coast, you know, we're talking about Philadelphia, we're talking about Washington, D.C. It's no longer chocolate city, but it's still brown, right? We're talking about all these, New York, all these places where you have all this construction stuff going on. And when you just casually walk through the construction sites, you hardly see any Black people working. And uh, Sister Karima made a point about the benefit of unions and union organizing. And she said, well, when we sign that union contract, we all getting paid the same. I wish I had a moment I could show you the poster that came out of the organizing effort from a few years ago amongst Black construction workers up in New York, where they showed like the differentials between what the white workers were being paid compared to the Black workers. And it was a difference, right? And just to illustrate, and this is just for, you know, purpose of illustration, if the white worker was paid, say, $25 an hour, the Black worker was paid $20 an hour, right? And even though they all supposedly belong to the same union, right, there still was a differential there as far as like the construction pay. Now, you know, it sounds like the transportation or transit workers don't have those type of issues, but in other industries, they still have those type of issues, right? So again, we need to support union organizing. We need to support an independent union such as New African Workers Union, and we need to support the Black caucuses within the mainstream unions and make sure that our people, the brothers and sisters, get the things that they rightfully deserve and more. They get the opportunities to be managers and to be leaders and to be advocates. So any other closing comments as we wind down?
Thanks for having me on. I don't usually do these kind of things. To the one sister's point earlier, real quick, about the property pimp, notice how it's the one who's willing to disadvantage his own people who they'll let operate. And every time I negotiate with one of their organizing bodies, I always have those type of things in the back of my mind. So I appreciate everybody else for being on here. I certainly agree with Brother Jeff and the others that made the points about investing in ourselves, because that's really the main point that I wanted to push across as well. So thank you, brother, for having me on, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Oh, very soon. All right, Brother Reese, always, man. So listen, I want to thank you all. Appreciate your participation. Let me see. I think we have maybe another closing comment here. Okay. So we're done for this afternoon. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Stay woke, stay conscious, stay strong, and continue to stay active. All power to the people, and all power to labor and the organized forces of production as well as distribution. All right, thank you all again. Look forward to speaking with you shortly again.